check. 1, 2, 3.
Say a little prayer, guys. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our mental health and suicide prevention webinar. We are glad that you've been able to tune in and join us tonight. We're hoping that all of the technology works fine. This is a first for us here at Renew Church. We're really glad to have you here tonight. I want to let you know right up front, if you haven't registered courses we want to make available to you at the end of the program tonight, and we can interest right now. So we think that this is really striking a nerve with people, and we're really glad. As the pastor of Renew Church, just a little bit of information. We are a multi-site church in the Western GTA. We have 4 campuses, one in Meadowvale. You won't be hearing from them tonight, but we do have a couple of our campus pastors with us, and I wanted to have them.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. My name's Andrew. I'm the campus pastor at the Milton campus.
Yeah, my name's Wade. I'm the campus pastor.
And they're going to be watching along with us, but we really appreciate our campus pastors. Bridge right now is in between pastors, but Christina is our speaker tonight, and she is actually here in the GTA for 24 years now, and I've seen the challenges related to mental health and how they've increased really over time, particularly in this last generation. This is married. The next 2 are soon to be married, and my last one is in high school. I do a lot of counseling, and I've had an increased amount. I know the impact that it's having on our young people as well, and I've had students in the public schools and so on, so I understand a lot. Suicide, I've seen all of these really up close, and I know that this is on the mind and hearts of our groups of people tuning into this tonight, so thank you guys for being here. Tonight we have a special guest who is going to be doing most of the friend, Christina Bifus. I know her husband Greg very well, and their 2 kids. And just a little bit of info about Chris. Also is an associate member of the Canadian Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. So she's a certified counselor. Domestic violence, grief, life transitions, marriage preparation, self-esteem, stress, and trauma. So her expertise is really a perfect fit for what we well gives her insight into the particular challenges faced by adolescents. And I know a number of you are looking for information as a technical note. The theories that have informed her counseling practices are CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Through her training and experience, she is able to provide counseling to individuals, couples, and families, and to help them cope and even thrive through the difficult really happy to announce that tonight. So we'll give you a little more information on that later at the end of our program. But I want to welcome Christina Bifus. Guys, she can't necessarily hear you from home, but the applause is there. So Christina, thank you for being here tonight. Here's how things are going to work before I hand it over to her. Our webinar is scheduled to last 90 minutes, and we'll do our best to stay within that time. We're going to have Christina define the terms for us, talk about depression, talk about anxiety, talk about suicide and suicide prevention particularly, about supporting loved ones that have mental illness and that need that support, about how we can all foster better mental health, and a little bit of a focus as well on COVID's impact on mental health, and she'll be touching on that. We will take 20 minutes or so to answer questions that you guys have submitted to us. Those of you that registered had the opportunity to do that, and so we've taken those. Many of the questions you submitted will get answered during the webinar, and Christina has tried to address many of those. And we will address other ones during that 20-minute time frame. You can submit other questions if you want, and so don't panic, okay? You'll hear about that in just a few minutes. It's anonymous, and you can actually use that to submit another few questions if you want to, and if we have time, we'll try to get to those, okay? We will also let you know how you can connect with Christina for more assistance after this event is over. I want to give a quick shout out to Merrick Kowalski, who worked on our visuals for tonight's presentation, and a huge shout out to our production manager, Eric Russell, who is the Wizard of Oz, making everything work tonight behind the scenes. And we almost had a very panicked moment right before going on air here. So Eric, keep it up. Thank you very much for all your work. Without further ado, I want to hand things over to Christina, who's going to start tonight by talking to us about the different terms that we should probably be aware of. So Christina, welcome, and take it away. Now I can hear
All right. Thanks, Pastor Bartley.
Great.
Once again, welcome to everyone who's joining us for this webinar. Thank you for taking the time this evening to engage in these really important and relevant topics. We're going to start the evening with a short video explaining the difference between the terms mental health and mental illness.
Mental health is an important part of our overall well-being and is something we all can play a role in addressing. It's a subject that deserves our attention. According to Statistics Canada, 1 in 3 Canadians will experience one of 6 mental illnesses or substance use disorders in their lifetime. Other research for the Mental Health Commission of Canada shows that, in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness or addiction. Awareness has been raised about the importance of helping those experiencing mental illness to get access to treatments that will improve their mental health. But what about the 4 in 5, or 80% of the population, who will not experience a mental illness or an addiction? What about their mental health? Are they mentally healthy? First, what is mental health? There is some confusion about what mental health means, and this can have an impact on how we address mental health. For example, a lot of people think that when we talk about mental health, we're talking about mental illness, that these subjects are one and the same. Really, mental health and mental illness are 2 different things. Mental illnesses are conditions where our thinking, mood, and behaviors severely and negatively impact how we function in our lives. Mental illnesses can include depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and other mood disorders. Mental health, on the other hand, like the term health, is a positive concept. It relates to our ability to enjoy life and to manage it in ways that help us reach our goals and cope with stresses. It's a sense of spiritual and emotional well-being. This means mental health is more than the absence of mental illness. Now, if mental health and mental illness are 2 different ideas, what's the relationship to one another? Sometimes, people picture mental health and mental illness being 2 ends of a continuum, as if one is the opposite of the other. But A lot of research shows that we should think about mental health and mental illness as separate yet interconnected concepts that need to be looked at, measured, and responded to differently. We should think of them on two separate continua. So here's what the mental health and mental illness continua really look like. On the mental illness continuum, one end runs from severe mental illness to no mental illness. On the mental health continuum, one end runs from poor mental health to good mental health. This model shows that a person without mental illness is not necessarily mentally healthy. They may be feeling down or experiencing a high level of stress because of life's circumstances. But it also shows us that we can all strive for good mental health, that even individuals with mental illness can have good mental health.
If you are having trouble with that video, it'll be made available to you after the webinar. So according to the World Health Organization, good mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Before we dive too much into our topics for tonight, we'd like to see what you, our audience, know and believe about mental health by asking you to participate in a poll. You'll be able to do that by going to slido.com or scanning the QR code with your phone. So you'll now see on your screen the website that's there, slido.com, and there is an access code for you to enter. As the questions come across your device, you'll be able to vote true or false for each one. We'll give you just a minute to get there.
It may take just a minute for it to come in. All right, let's start with our first speaker. Mental illness indirectly affects all conditions at some time with a family member, friend, or colleague. All right, let's go to our first statement.
So we see that a lot of people have voted true here. That is correct. That's true. Mental illness indirectly affects all Canadians at some time through a family member, friend, or colleague. Let's go to the second one. All right. In any given year, that is actually false. In any given year, we'll see 1 in 5 people in Canada who will personally. Go ahead and vote on the third question, the third statement there. Right, the third statement is on mental illness affecting people. Mental illness affects only certain age groups of people. Is that true or false? Let's see your votes. Yes, that is absolutely false. Mental illness affects people of all ages, education, income levels, and cultures. We're going to go to the next statement now. So by age 40, about 25% of the population will have had a mental illness. Is that true or false? We see some votes coming in here. Let's go ahead and show those results. Oh, about 54% of you said true and 46% said false. That is false. By age 40, about 50% of the population will have had or have had a mental illness. Let's move on to the next one. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in both men and women from adolescence to middle age. Is that true or false? Okay, let's get your votes in. All right, let's see those results. That is true. It is one of the leading causes of death in both men and women from adolescence to middle age. Now let's go to the next one. So the mortality rate due to suicide among men is less than the rate among women. True or false? All right, let's have a look at what the results are. I see that false has been voted 86% by our audience here, and that is false. The mortality rate due to suicide among men is actually 4 times the rate than among women. Our next statement is, here in Canada, most children who need mental health services receive them. That be true or false? Let's go ahead and see those answers. That is a correct vote of 98% false. That is absolutely true that that most children do not receive the mental health services that they need. In fact, only 1 out of 5 children who need mental health services receive them. So next, let's look at the second last one that we've got here. Once depression is recognized, help can make a difference for 80% of people who are affected. True or false? All right, let's see those results. Okay, so once depression is recognized, help can make a difference for 80% of the people who are affected, and this allows them to get back into their regular activities. Let's see the last statement here. This is the final one that we're going to look at today. So Canada's youth suicide rate is the 3rd highest in the industrialized world. Okay, let's show those results. This is true. Mental illness is increasingly threatening the lives of our children. The Canada's suicide rate among youth is the 3rd highest in the industrialized world. Hopefully, through this poll, you've learned or reaffirmed some of the information that you knew before about mental health. And
for us. I got tripped up on a couple of those. I know you gave me the results ahead of time, but I tried to do it without looking at those, and I did get a couple wrong. But I think our audience seems pretty well tuned in. I think we got most of the questions right as a group. We're going to be heading into the topic of depression. I know that this is one, as we talk about mental health, that's right at the top of the list. It's something a lot of people suffer from. It's something that I've suffered from. So, Christina, I'm going to just...
So as we start in here on depression, the first thing that I'd like to say about it is that depression is one of the 2 main forms of mood disorders that we see, the other being bipolar disorder. Let's go to the first slide there. So in terms of it being a mood disorder, we'll see in people who struggle with depression that they're experiencing moods that we would see instead of just being sad or blue, they would be experiencing a depressed mood. And in that, we would see that there's a loss of interest or enjoyment in all the activities that they would normally enjoy. And we would see also that their mood is impairing their work, school, social relationships, and some of this mood impairment can be resulting in consequences such as financial, legal, relational, employment loss. And we will see this mood persisting for at least 2 weeks. Let's take a look at some of the causes and risk factors for depression. So there is no single cause for depression, but there are some potential triggers. Some of them are a genetic or family history of depression, psychological or emotional vulnerability, biological factors such as imbalance in brain chemistry or in the endocrine or immune systems. Major stresses in a person's life can result in depression. Results of another illness, perhaps, or a reaction to an illness or neurological changes can also cause depression. Some of the outward signs that we'll see of depression are looking sad, speaking slowly or in monotones, a lack of attention to physical appearance and personal hygiene, and decreased energy, so fatigue and irritability. So the effects of depression are that it affects emotions, thinking, and behavior. This is why we see cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, so successful in helping people to gain skills to cope with depression. And some of the examples of the emotional effects that we would see as a result of depression would be sadness, anxiety, guilt, anger, mood swings. We would also see some thinking effects on thinking. For instance, frequent self-criticism, self-blame, worry, pessimism, difficulty making decisions, for example. And some behavioral effects would be crying spells, withdrawing from others, neglecting responsibilities, or a loss of motivation. And finally, some physical effects that we would see would be chronic fatigue, overeating, loss of appetite, significant weight gain or weight loss, unexplained aches and pains in the body, a loss of sexual desire, and in women, potentially irregular menstrual cycle. And it's important to note that not everyone who is depressed show all symptoms.
Depression more, kind of to identify the signs. I remember when I experienced it, it was kind of hard to know what I was going through, and having some of these, some of these factors to look at. As these are, there's a wide variety of symptoms like you've described, and sometimes you have to put the things together to try to see where you're at. And I'm sure you'll talk about that again later, just about getting proper diagnosis for these things from your health professional, right? Like you can start by doing some self-assessment, but when you've got a hint that something's going on, maybe going and getting a professional to give their opinion, right? Well, we're going to talk entities, so take us into the whole discussion on anxiety.
Right. So anxiety is a normal feeling that everyone experiences at some point. It's a natural response that's useful for avoiding dangerous situations, and it motivates us to solve problems. A particular situation doesn't need to be negative or to be anxiety provoking. And anxiety can last for a few moments. And in the case of anxiety disorders, we see anger flight reaction. The fighter part is ready to battle and can't relax. And the flight part flees to avoid the situation. So let's have a look at the difference between normal anxiety and an anxiety disorder. In an anxiety disorder, we're going to see more severe or intense anxiety that is long lasting. Many types of anxiety disorders are, we see many types of them. And the main ones that we would see are generalized anxiety disorder. And that's when we would hear someone say, I have anxiety. We see panic attack, social anxiety disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And these are just a few. So it's common for people to have several aspects of anxiety disorder and not fit neatly into any of the categories that I just mentioned. An anxiety disorder affects the way a person feels, the way they think, the way they behave. And these disorders are the most common mental disorders that we see among children and adolescents if they're suicide. So let's have a look at the causes and the risk factors for these anxiety disorders. So it appears that anxiety disorders are caused by a combination of biological and psychological factors, as well as changing life experiences. And these include stressful or traumatic life events, family history of anxiety disorders, childhood development issues, alcohol, medications, or illegal substances, and other medical or psychiatric problems. In terms of the signs and symptoms that we would see in anxiety disorders, we've got two main ones, and they're psychological and physical symptoms. In terms of the psychological symptoms, we see fear, a sense of impending doom, going mad. We also see decreased attention and concentration, and it's possible that the person who's feeling really anxious would feel that their environment is unreal and unfamiliar. They may feel detached from themselves, and that there's a speeding or slowing of their thoughts. They're generally easily distracted, irritable, insomnia, and vivid dreams are some possible symptoms as well. For the physical signs that we would see, generally, they're cardiovascular, respiratory, neurological, gastrointestinal, musculoskeletal symptoms to anxiety. And some of the cardiovascular ones would be heart palpitations, chest pains, rapid heart rate. We'll see hyperventilation or shortness of breath. Headaches are some neurological effects. For gastrointestinal, we would see choking, dry mouth, nausea, vomiting. And in terms of musculoskeletal, we'd see muscle aches, tension, and restlessness. So a panic attack or panic attacks would be an anxiety disorder as well. And you're going to see in just a moment a list of symptoms. And when we see 4 or more of these symptoms develop abruptly and peak within 10 minutes, we can say that there is a panic attack, or we can term that a panic attack. So let's have the list up of the symptoms that we would see. Many of these physical symptoms are similar to the ones that we would experience actually if we were having a heart attack. So intense fear, that's inappropriate for the circumstance. Palpitations of the heart, pounding of the heart, sweating, trembling. So any 4 of these symptoms on the list, peaking within 10 minutes would be said to exhibit a panic attack.
See all of these symptoms actually listed on a board like that. It kind of strikes you as, this is really serious stuff that we're talking about. I know sometimes when people talk about anxiety or depression, they don't give it the level of seriousness maybe that it deserves. But like you say, these are symptoms that you see with other things to see how significant they are. Sorry, I've got a little dry throat. This leads us into one of the things that I think a lot of people have been wanting to get answers about, and that is about suicide. Here are two kind of to get their statistics in order on suicide. So it's not statistics that are usually readily available. So even during this pandemic, we're having a hard time knowing exactly how much it's being reflected in the suicide numbers. We are seeing some numbers come in. Places like Japan have released them and are seeing here in North America. So that's very serious stuff. And I know a lot of people that are tuning in are wanting to just get a better understanding on this. They're wanting to know sometimes for themselves or even for people that they love around them, just being able to identify the signs and understanding suicide and what goes into that a little bit more. So Christina, go ahead and
associated with suicide. So risk factors are the elements in a person's life that can put a strain on their ability to cope with stress or trauma and are therefore associated with increased suicide risk. So if someone presents risk factors or warning sign, it's important to reach out and absolutely ask about suicide. It's important to understand that the presence of one or more of the risk factors doesn't necessarily mean that the person is thinking about suicide. It does mean, though, that the history of mental illness or of substance abuse or trauma would be a risk factor or would be risk factors. A history of a family history of suicide, a job or relationship loss, a lack of social support, barriers to accessing health care, surviving a suicide loss, having had thoughts of suicide or attempted suicide in the past, and exposure to graphic or sensationalized accounts of suicide, and finally, access to lethal methods of suicide during a time of increased risk. And I'm going to talk about some protective factors in just a second. And I just want to underline that these protective factors don't mean that a person cannot be affected by thoughts of suicide. They just lower the risk. So in terms of factors that counter the risk factors that I just mentioned, these are helpful in lowering the risk. So good communication skills are important to do that. Support from peers and a close social network. So when someone's feeling supported or they have people around them, that is a protective factor. A sense of humor, the ability to manage or handle or reduce stress. A sense of connectedness with others, whether it's within the school community for students, the community in general, a group of friends or family, that's helpful. Cultural and religious beliefs that promote healthy living are positive as well. Problem solving, conflict resolution skills, having good ones are helpful. Feeling a sense of purpose in life and general life satisfaction is a positive. Supportive and effective medical and mental health care. And we'll continue to see that as kind of a theme for mental wellness, having supportive and effective medical care and access to good health care and good mental health care. And finally, policies in workplaces and schools that support good mental health, that talk about that, offer resources and promote that are helpful. Those are protective factors. So most people who die by suicide actually indicate that they are at risk. And if someone is demonstrating any signs of being at risk for suicide, we have some clues and some ways to determine that. So I'm going to share with you now some common signs that we would see, warning signs for suicide that we might want to look out for. And I'm just going to speak to each one as they come up for you at home. So ideation. And ideation is talking about death or suicide or making direct statements such as, I wish I was dead, or I'm going to kill myself. Substance abuse is another warning sign. So any increased use of drugs or alcohol. Purposelessness is another. The feeling of having no purpose in life. Anxiety, experiencing excessive anxiety, feeling trapped. So if someone's indicating a feeling of being trapped in a particular situation or feeling trapped in life in general, that's a warning sign. Hopelessness or helplessness, so indicating that nothing will ever change or nothing's gonna get better. Withdrawal, wanting to be alone or avoiding social contact. Anger is another warning sign. Constant irritableness or sudden outbursts of anger or aggression. Recklessness is yet another. So engaging in risky or self-destructive behavior. And finally, mood changes. So when we're seeing sudden and dramatic fluctuations in mood, that could be a warning sign. And is path warm is an acronym that we use to help us to identify and remember these warning signs for suicide.
Christina, this is very helpful, and I think that many who are tuning into this, especially those that have close loved ones, particularly young people during this time. You mentioned earlier that sometimes during intense times of stress that these things become more prevalent. That these are signs that they can be watching for, and the acronym is helpful too. Are there some other common warning signs that we should be watching for?
Sure. Yes, there are some others that can be quite obvious when we know what we're looking for. Giving away valued possessions. So if someone's got some things that are valuable to them that we know about, and they're just offering them to others. A change in normal routine, including eating habits and sleep patterns. Putting our affairs in order. So suddenly finalizing insurance or dealing with debt. Saying goodbye to people as though it were a final goodbye is a pretty strong warning sign. Loss of interest in hobbies and activities that they once enjoyed. A lack of self-care and previous suicide attempts would also be warning signs. So it's important to reduce the risk of suicide by taking some measures, and there are strategies to do that. And I'm going to talk about a few of them just a little bit and expand on some that you'll see a lot. Care, support for mental health concerns, and building a good relationship with a doctor and other healthcare professionals is extremely important. So when you're seeing a medical doctor, you want to make sure that you are engaged in that process with the doctor. You're asking a lot of questions. You're ensuring that you understand the care that they're providing for you, and you're discussing with them and learning about any medication that they're prescribing. So in terms of the medication, you want to learn about the possible short and long-term effects, including the benefits and side effects of the medication that they're prescribing, if they're prescribing any. And you want to keep on top of that. It's important to have really open dialogue with your doctor about what is happening in your life. If there's any substance abuse, if there's any or use, anything like that that could really impact medication. If a doctor is giving you a prescription, follow it been provided to the doctor. So it's really important to have open communication around all of that. And it's also important to see that in terms of seeking talk therapy, just understanding the goals that you co-create with whoever the counselor or the therapist that you're working with is, and work toward them would be really good strategies to reduce the risks. Another really key strategy is to build social networks, such as family, friends, a peer group, a support group, or connections within your cultural community or faith community, whatever that is, and learning good skills to deal with problems and trusting that you are able to deal with problems would be some strategies for reducing risk. So if someone were to have suicidal thoughts and to be concerned about suicidal ideation, it's really important to schedule frequent appointments, requesting frequent phone support, especially in this time where we're not able to go necessarily to the doctor's office, to numbers that are available to you so that you can access them very easily and readily. 911 is always open for an emergency. So if you're experiencing a crisis, 911 is always a number that can be called. And you can always go to your nearest emergency room. Just to support you in if you're having suicidal thoughts, and the family and friends or support group for that can be really helpful. It's important to talk, and it could be helpful to learn from others who've experienced thoughts of suicide, to learn the coping strategies. A really good coping strategy is creating a safety plan. So developing a safety plan can include, it can be a really good strategy for coping. And a safety plan can include activities that calm you or take your mind off thoughts. And in your safety plan, you can list some reasons for living so that you can refer to those when you're having struggles. A list of key people to call if you're worried about your safety. And as I mentioned before, a list of phone numbers, local numbers to call in crisis. So there are lots of suicide prevention helplines that are available in all regions that can be contacted. And a list of safe places to go if you're not feeling safe at home.
Insight into how individuals can even just take care of themselves, because the truth is, during this pandemic, a lot of people are just isolated. Watch out for them. So I love the fact that you've given us some tips here, just things that you can be watching for and doing just for yourself, and almost keeping tabs on yourself that way. Let's talk as well about supporting loved ones, both with anxiety and depression, and then after that in relation to suicide.
So there are some ways in which we can help those around us who struggle with anxiety and depression. And we can do that by learning about mental illness and addiction. That's really important. We can talk to them about our concerns, and we can encourage them to seek help. We can get support for them, and if they're part of your family, for your family as well. And it's really important to take care of yourself. So in terms of thoughts of suicide and supporting those around us who have suicidal ideation, we must be asking them directly if they're thinking about suicide. And I find that sometimes people are afraid to ask if someone is thinking about suicide. And I just want to reassure you that talking about suicide won't give them the idea. If someone is seriously considering suicide, they may be relieved that they can talk about it. So it's important to ask directly. And you want to ask them if they have a plan. So if they have a plan and intend to end their life soon, then you will want to connect them with crisis services and supports right away. So a crisis distress line or suicide helpline. And 911 is always, like I mentioned before, available to call if you don't know who to call. And if you're placing that call to a crisis or a distress line, you want to stay with them, with that person while you're making the call, and don't leave until the crisis line or emergency responders say that you can, if it's safe for you to do so. So you always have to be aware of things you can do for a loved one is listen and help connect them to mental health services.
Christina, I like what you're saying, even about calling 911 if you need to, because I've been in that situation before where, I was interacting with someone that I could tell was in a state of crisis. I'm not equipped to protect that person. So I'm going to stay with them, call 911, get a professional there. They're trained even in how to assess whether that person is potentially a threat to themselves, and they will take them to the hospital, wherever they need to take them, to put them in a safe place. So I think that that's really important, and thanks for sharing that. Tell us some more about talking to loved ones about suicide.
Sure. Just a few tips for talking to someone about suicide. It can be really an intimidating conversation to have. And so I just wanted to provide you with just some really key things that you can do to make this conversation more manageable. So you'd want to find a private place where you can go with your loved one to take as much time as you need and as they need to be able to talk. And while you're talking, it's really important to listen. Listen without judgment. Their feelings are very real. So that aspect of just listening and non-judgmentally is really important. While you're talking, you want to make sure that you're not making promises to them that you can't keep or that you don't intend to keep. So you want to keep your word. It's in terms of making promises, it's really key and important not to say, I will not tell about this information that you're telling me, because not telling might put that person in jeopardy and yourself. So it's really important to not make promises that you can't keep. You want to reassure them that they're important to you and that you care about them, so so that they feel that support and connection and that love. And you will also want to connect them to any services that you're aware of. So this is why it's so important that we all know and learn what the services that are available around us and to us are, so that we can share those with others who may need them. Some people may have access to resources if they're students through school. There are a lot of school resources that are available to teens and young people in university or college as well. So communities, they may be able to access resources that way as well. And the last key tip that I want to share with you about talking about suicide is taking care of your own mental health and seeking support if you need it.
Mask first, right? Before helping someone else put theirs on. You know, a lot of this stuff, Christina, is life. And, you know, for everyone that's watching, we're going to have this video available on the website later, and you can share that and let other people know they can come and watch this. There's some excellent information here. Better mental health on a day-to-day basis, and maybe prevent, you know, so many of us from getting to that place where we're in that crisis or in that place of risk. What
Find this model that I'm going to share with you really holistic in thinking about mental health and health in general. It's called the biopsychosocial spiritual model. And it's got for ensuring that we're getting enough exercise, rest, that we're practicing good nutrition, we're eating well. And also it speaks to chemical and hormonal balance aspects. If we're due for blood work, that we're getting that, and we're seeking that medical attention so that we can care for the biological aspect, our thoughts, and managing our emotions, regulating our emotions properly. And these aspects overlap, as you can see. And when we're not caring